we're going to look at the second word, which is Luke 23:43. It's where Jesus says, I tell you the truth, today you will be with me in paradise. And he says it to one of the criminals that's crucified with him. He's crucified with two different criminals. And this promise God gives a criminal is a reward that he says for the way the criminal has humility, his response to the suffering that they were going through, and the faith that he has, which is greater than a lot of people that were there with him at the time. And we're going to start off by looking at the way he responded to the suffering that was going on and how we're supposed to. There are always two ways to respond to suffering. One way is to criticize everything that's happening, start blaming God, ask him, why is this happening to me? Why did you do this? Or you need to come and fix this now. And there's another way where you accept that you're powerless in what's happened. It's probably you're the reason that the sufferings happen, and you got to accept your fault in it. And you also got to know that the mercy of God and the grace of God is there to help you. And that's the difference between both the criminals that happens over here. But we're going to look at what's common between both of them. Both criminals, both of them were charged guilty, unlike Jesus. Both of them saw Jesus being mocked. They saw the soldiers harassing him. They saw everything because they were with him while he walked up to the cross. They saw his suffering. They heard his prayer to the Father, asking for forgiveness. They also saw the sign that was above his head, calling him the King of the Jews. And they also both wanted to be saved from the suffering that they were going through. But they both went about it in two different ways. The first criminal, in verse 39, he goes and he says, he goes and he asks God, aren't you the Christ? Save yourself and us. And when he does this, what you can see from this is that he shows a lack of guilt. He never goes and asks God, look, I've done something wrong and I'm the one in fault. He shows a lack of humility. He shows no remorse for what he's done. He's been convicted, unlike Jesus over there, for something that he's done. He also wants God to get him out of the tough situation. He didn't want to change himself in any way while doing so. And that's almost like using God like, how many of you know what a car jack is in a car? It's when you need to change a tire. You put it underneath and you crank it up so the car is lifted a little bit so you can change the tire. This is almost like using God like that, having him in your car boot, and you're going through a journey of life, and then you get a trouble that comes your way, and all of a sudden you take him out, you ask him to fix your problem, you fix it, and then you put him back. And that's not the way we got to ask God for help, because that's showing him lack of respect for what he did and a lack of love for what he did on the cross when he died for our sins. We can't just keep going back to him whenever we're in suffering, because whenever suffering comes in the way of our life goals, our life plans, and life pleasures. This is one of the main differences from the first and second criminal. The second one doesn't conform to the way the others are, the way the others are mocking Jesus, the way the others are all making fun of him. He realizes that what's happening right there is something greater. He doesn't want to be deceived by what's happening. That's the way the world is nowadays. There are so many ways that we can be deceived, and we can always move away from God. We can always try to blame God. We can always try to not go to him for help. Because it's so much easier to just walk away than it is to follow the path of God. And he rebukes, the second thing that is, he rebukes the first criminal. He asks him, don't you fear God? Don't you fear God, in verse 40. He realized the presence of who he was in, and he realized he had no right to challenge God, because unlike him and the other criminal who were convicted of crimes, Jesus was dying over there for no one's sin. He had no blame on him. And he had humility. That's one of the key things God looks for. He accepted what he did before God. In verse 41, where he goes, we are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong. He knows that he did something wrong. And that's one of the things God's want. God is all-knowing and all-seeing. He can see when you've done something wrong. But what he's looking for in your heart is you accepting and you acknowledging the fact that you accept that you have done something wrong. And the next thing he does is he confesses the sin, that he's done and accepts the punishment. He knows that what he's done is completely wrong, and he gives something, and God gives him something in return that's far greater than just saving him from the cross. God could have saved him from the cross right then and there. But one of the key things we have to remember is God works in different ways to what we want. We might think, why didn't God, instead of giving it, just save him from the cross and save him from the suffering that's happening right then and there? But no, God gave him something far greater. He gave him eternal life, which is what we have to remember. We might want something at that time, at the very moment when we're going through a suffering, but he has a greater plan that's there for you. He knows what is right for you, and he's going to help you through it. One of the other key things to remember during suffering is that God doesn't create any of the troubles or sufferings in your lives, but he will do incredible and great things through them. He's not there for you to... He's not the one. He's not like, I want you to have sickness, I want you to fail, I want you to have that. But he's there to work great things, to have an example for you, to show you as an example for everyone else around you. And one of the key things to remember from this thing is also, we have no right to demand or challenge God for anything that any suffering that we're going through. We have no right, because we have done nothing in this life, and we can never do anything, even if we lived for another 1,000 years, that could give us the right to demand something from God. But at the same time, God has given us the grace, and he sacrificed, and he's given a promise that he will always be there to save us, and he'll always be there through the suffering with us, which is what the criminal saw, that someone so pure was being crucified over there. The next thing that we're going to look at are the two ways in which you can respond to hopelessness. There's the two types of people over there. Was the next thing that we're going to look at, my bad, is the criminal and the followers of Christ that were over there. Out of the two people over there, these followers followed Jesus for his whole ministry. Most of them were over there by his foot, but they started losing hope. If you look into the next chapter, in verse 24, chapter 24, verse 21, one of the followers even say, we hope that he was the one who redeemed Israel. And the keyword is hope. They already lost hope at that point. They didn't think anything was going to happen. These are the same people in the last year alone, right before his death, witnessed Jesus feed 5,000 people, walk on water, the transfiguration of him on the mountain, and him resurrecting someone from the dead. And yet they lost hope when the moment he died. But the difference is, the criminal who's being crucified, he saw the purity and humility and the grace that was there, and he was how undeserving Jesus was of death, and he was laying his life down. So that's the reason. At the end, he asked God to remember him when he when he goes into paradise, because he knew that he wasn't worthy of anything else. He just wanted to put a request in, and God saw his humility, God saw his hope, God saw his faith that was almost lost by everyone else, and he rewarded him with the great acceptance. One of the other things we got to remember from this is never be complacent with God. These people, the followers of Christ, like many of us, we tend to forget all the great things that he's done in our lives. We tend to forget all the miracles he's performed, all the protection, how many times he's protected us, how many times he's given us things that we've asked for and prayed for. And whenever the first sign of trouble comes, we start to question God, like, why did you do this? Or, oh, I hope for this rather than this. This is like one of the key examples. The moment they started losing hope because they thought Jesus wasn't there, was that very moment. At that time, he was doing something great. He was doing something great for humanity. They were thinking small. They were just thinking about the kingdom of Israel. But God at that time was establishing the kingdom of heaven by doing that. So we can never question God, and we should always know that he has a plan for us that's much greater. And lastly, we're going to look at God's acceptance. When God gave him this promise, when God told him that he'll see him in paradise, he accepted the man's forgiveness. And that shows that our deeds alone in this life doesn't save us. It's also our faith. It's never too late to turn to God. No sin that you commit is too great for God to forgive him. And there's no suffering that's too hard that he won't hold your hand personally and pick you up and take you, go along it with you. So we always got to remember that humility, faith, and the way we respond to situations, we got to always have a humble heart and be ready, because God is always there to help us. Amen.